This is a genus project on the genus Sagittaria. Common name is arrowhead. So Sagittaria reminds you of Sagittarius. That's the archer from astronomy, constellations. So pretty commonly this arrowhead-shaped leaf with pointed rearward-facing lobes. Although, as we'll see, this is not always distinctive of members of Sagittaria. So overall, the genus has almost 40 species found worldwide, a lot of them in the Northern Hemisphere, and a good number of them, as we will see, in the Americas, North America and South America. In Wisconsin, we're going to cover these 7 species and talk about how to tell them apart. So Sagittaria is in the family ALISMATACEAE, along with the genus ALISMA and another species or another genus that's not as well represented in Wisconsin called Echinodorus. What they have in common, they're both monocots in this family, of course, so they have parallel venation. In Sagittaria, sometimes that parallel venation gets a little confusing as the veins point towards the terminal tips of these leaves, but also they kind of branch out separately, pointing towards the basal lobes on those arrowhead-shaped leaves. Altogether, this family can be identified, as we covered, in the fact that they have whorled inflorescences, so sometimes whorled branching, more often in Alisma, and then also whorled flowers coming out along the inflorescence. And then lots of other monocot features, 3 petals, 3 sepals. In this case, lots of stamens and lots of carpels in the flowers as well. Getting into the flowers, Sagittaria has unisexual flowers, sometimes on the same plant, sometimes on separate plants. So on the left here is a Sagittaria female inflorescence, so showing female flowers with dense clusters of separate carpels. In the middle shows male flowers of Sagittaria with clusters of stamens together. And then Alisma, this is a bisexual flower with stamens and also carpels. And then when they go to fruit, the fruits are different between these genera. Sagittaria has the fruits more in a globe. Both of these have rather flattened achenes as their fruitlets. So it's an aggregate of achenes for the inflorescence type. And then the individual achenes are arranged in Sagittaria in much more of a globe versus more of a flattened ring for the genus Alisma. So a few features that would help you to tell Sagittaria from other genera in Alismataceae there. Another one, last one here, is the type of the achenes. So achenes have much more flattened fruits, and more often with this lateral wing, as we'll see, is sometimes useful for telling species apart of Sagittaria. Okay, so these are our species. Probably doesn't make too much sense to go through the key one step at a time, but this is the key to species of Sagittaria. And just browsing through this really quickly, you can see that we have some features like whether the leaves are arrowhead shaped or not, whether the fruiting heads are stalked, so sessile versus stalked, plants annual versus perennial, bract sizes, and arrangement of the achene beaks are going to be useful for telling these species apart. So I'm just going to go through each of the species, highlight their morphology, and then show you their geography. So first one, Sagittaria brevirostra. We're just going alphabetically here. For starters, this one has long bracts. It's going to share that with the next species we talk about. So in the inflorescence, really long bracts here, subtending those flowers on the inflorescence, and the beaks more long on these achene beaks and heading off to the side and kind of curving upwards. So a little bit hard maybe to orient to these, but for this, let's say we look at this one, the base of that achene is here, and so toward the top, there's not a beak at the top, it's off to the side, and it kind of curves up toward the end here, toward the apex. And that can be helpful for telling this species apart. Also the lobe features, so the basal leaf lobes pretty pronounced here, quite long. If you were to measure the length of the basal leaf lobe, that's actually longer than the terminal lobe, or the, I guess the rest of the blade for that leaf. Similar species to Sagittaria brevirostra is Sagittaria cuneata. And I guess let me just show you the map there. This is Sagittaria brevirostra. This is only a North American species, and kind of reaches its northern range limit more or less in Wisconsin. I'm not sure what's going on in Canada here. Okay, so on to Sagittaria cuneata. So as we saw, lots of features that were distinctive to the previous species would then be contrasted in this species. So we have leaves with still a short, or now a short basal lobe, much shorter than this terminal lobe on the arrowhead-shaped leaves. So still arrowhead-shaped, but much different proportions on those leaves. The achenes have beaks that are more towards the, a little bit more towards the tip and shorter than in the previous species. And a feature that's shared with the previous species is this long bract again in the inflorescence. So two species that are pretty similar to each other with some features to tell them apart. Sagittaria cuneata is a little more northern and western species. Also kind of at the edge of its range in Wisconsin, and just another map showing a broader distribution outside of the United States, much into Canada, out into Alaska, as far as the global distribution of this species, Sagittaria cuneata. One of the more common ones, Sagittaria latifolia, is a common name, the broadleaf arrowhead. And this one contrasts with the other two we just saw in having short bracts on the inflorescence. So much shorter here, less than 1 centimeter long, and they were pretty pronounced and longer than that length in the other species. And the achene beaks off to the sides still, but kind of projecting from the tip. So if you go to the tip of this fruitlet and then head off to the side, that's kind of the aspect of that achene beak. The beak being this pointed bit here. So Sagittaria latifolia, as I said, pretty widespread. Range extends down into parts of South America, up north into parts of Canada. Pretty common also in Wisconsin, and just filling up the state, whereas those other species were a little bit more patchy distribution in Wisconsin. This one has a fun name, Sagittaria montevidensis, known as the giant arrowhead. Also has some interesting pigmentation on the petals, which I often see on photographs. I don't know if that's distinctive, so when the key describes how to identify this, it doesn't mention those in the key, but I often see that in the photographs that I've come across. This one is identified for a couple of features. I just put the leaf image on here. I thought that was a pretty neat image. It has the common name of giant arrowhead, so maybe some specimens of this species are some of the largest of the Sagittaria. And the things to look out for actually confidently identifying this one are the aspect of the sepals in the fruit. So I didn't really focus on those in previous images, but in this one you can see the sepal is just hanging on really tightly. So this term oppressed. Sepals are oppressed to the globe of achenes here. And another feature is these really thick, stout stalks leading to the fruiting heads of the inflorescence. And this one's Montevidensis, I think is maybe a South American origin for its name, Montevideo. And so it does extend down into South America, has a range split where it's kind of temperate South America and temperate North America, temperate to tropical in both of those places. Taxonomically, there are some subdivisions within this species, Sagittaria montevidensis. So subspecies montevidensis, subspecies spongiosa, not found in Wisconsin, but we do have this one sometimes treated as its own species, but these days treated as a subspecies. So subspecies calycina of species Sagittaria montevidensis. Again, just a little bit in Wisconsin and kind of an exceptional species to find here along the Mississippi River. The last two species are ones that are have different form of the leaves. So the leaf shape is not always absolute for identifying these, but certainly can be helpful. This one has the common name of grass-leaved arrowhead, and you can probably see why that would be the case. So it has still parallel venation, leaves broaden a little bit. For the most part, though, they're very long leaves. So not arrowhead shaped. And this one, in contrast to the next species, has pistillate flowers that are stalked. So I just want to make sure we're looking at the right kind of flowers here. Down at the bottom, this is a pistillate flower with that kind of grainy green appearance. That's all those separate achenes on there developing. And off to the side here, you can see the stalks, very clearly stalked flowers that are the female flowers there. And this one, Sagittaria gramineea, pretty widespread. And the Wisconsin Flora book treats these under the same part of that key and then ends up subdividing these two species. So I just went ahead and kind of downplayed this other species, Sagittaria cristata, which is also found in Wisconsin. So Sagittaria cristata, Sagittaria gramineea, both found in Wisconsin, both morphologically similar, both only in North America. And then finally, Sagittaria rigida. This is similar to the previous species in having these linear kind of grass-like leaves, but its common name tells us about the feature that would be useful for identifying this one, in that its female flowers have no stalks, so no pedicel on those. They develop into fruits that are right along the inflorescence axis here. So this is actually 3 separate fruits that develop from 3 separate flowers. Again, want to pay attention and make sure you're noticing the female flowers when you're looking at these. All right, so some features and some illustrations to show you how to tell these apart. This one also kind of maybe a northern Great Lakes kind of distribution for most of North America, and then some exceptional locations in other states. Found one paper from 2012 that looked at the phylogeny. This was an attempt to understand the phylogeny of the family ALISMATACEAE. So I've highlighted the local Sagittaria species on the right side here. These are the geographic ranges. And A there, as you can see in the map, is North America, B is South America. So species found in North America are in A there. Sagittaria isoetiformis, we didn't talk about that one, but that one's also in North America. So there's some that are found in more southern latitudes in the United States, and that's one of them. So this isn't a terribly complete phylogeny, but it does suggest that this genus had an origin in the Americas. So lots of A's there in the ancestral reconstruction. So an ancestral location in the Americas, and then E is Southeast Asia, it turns out. So heading out into Eurasia at that point. So maybe these are descended from ancestral arrowheads in North America, the ones that we have here. Still not very representative of the diversity of the genus. So I got a little bit updated data for this phylogeny of Sagittaria. Highlighted on here, I've got just the text telling you where these different species can be found. So United States, kind of this group down here in the Americas, and then a transition at this point to Eurasia, and then a separate group of North American, ones that you can find in Wisconsin, a separate group of North American natives that would have secondarily come into North America from Eurasia somehow. So maybe shared an ancestor that diversified in North America, which gives us kind of these big blocks of genetic difference. So different species in Wisconsin. These down here may be descended from a common North American ancestor. And then up here, a different dispersal into North America. So you might expect some morphological similarities in those different groups, and kind of interestingly didn't find that. So there's a lot of, as we saw in the key and in the morphological features, there are a lot of features to identify these species that are a little bit like one-off treatments. So, you know, a thick flower stalk or oppressed sepals or things like that. One of the features you might think, I just explored this one, you might think that leaf shape was useful for telling these species apart, and it kind of is. If you plot the linear leaved species, you kind of get them in here. These other species, I can just tell by the names here. Platyphila is flat leaf, filiformis, kind of skinny in the name there. Lancifolia, so lanceolate leaves. Isoetiformis also has skinny leaves. So this kind of ancestral skinny leaf feature, I probably should have highlighted more of the morphology on these other species. And then the arrowhead-shaped leaves more in the this other group of species with that Eurasian ancestor. And then this one that I don't know if there might be just a mistake on there, or this might be true. I'll have to double check it. The Sagittaria montevidensis also has arrowhead-shaped leaves, so it kind of bucks the trend of these being closer related based on their leaf shape. As always, more investigation required. So there's an example of the presentation you might give. I don't know what our time was on this one, but not too long. Mostly just looking to see that you've organized things together in a way that makes sense, and you can convey clearly what there are for morphology that can tell these different species apart. Mention and investigate the biogeography, mention and talk about and investigate the phylogeny, use the phylogeny to investigate geography, morphology, explore published studies about the group you're looking at. And I just want to do maybe a little shout out that I got a lot of my images from iNaturalist. And I'd recommend that one as a resource for photographs that are abundant. There's lots of photographs there, and they're also curated. So when people post photographs that get identified, those are identified by the community of naturalists who are looking to get correct identifications. So you get a good source of mostly open source images, ones that people are happy to share, and ones that have correct biological names on them. So really excited for that resource, and I think you should take advantage of it. All right, good luck on your project.